remove this stock utility bed, and we're going to build a bed cage. And stay tuned. So the first thing we've done is attached the flatbed, the utility bed, and then I removed the bottom section. So we're still going to keep that bed just for scale accessories and stuff. I think I'm going to put different shock towers because they have about, I don't know, maybe ½ inch more. If this can all go down before it hits the top of the pumpkin. And I'd like to get everything as low as possible. So I'm going to remove these shock towers next. These are good shock towers, Rc, check them out. But I'm going to remove those, and then I'm going to add my angled tabs to the farthest corners of existing holes, and then we're going to build off from that. We're going to start doing some bends, following the contours of the body. A little bit higher on the top, just to add a little bit of protection. Yeah. So the next thing I did, remove those shock towers. And then I removed, well, I cleaned these up too, it's kind of gross. I removed the springs from the shocks. And the reason I removed the springs from the shocks is so I can see where it is when it's fully compressed, not to push down every time. So that way I can get an idea for where I want my shock tower, or I want my shock mount to be. So the more vertical your shock, the more work the spring does. As you lay the shock down, the spring doesn't have to do as much work, so it's going to be a softer feel. So I'm going to try to get these at a similar angle to they were before, but obviously I want this bed as low as possible. Before it bottomed out about there, and as you can see, it's about ½ inch. I mean, that's obviously a rough guess, but when I set up suspension mounting, I like to have it with the springs out, just so I can see where full compression is, especially on building a scale crawler. You want it to look good, and you want everything to be low, that way you can get maximum performance. So the next thing I did, remove those shock towers. And then I removed, well, I cleaned these up too, it's kind of gross. I removed the springs from the shocks. And the reason I removed the springs from the shocks is so I can see where it is when it's fully compressed, not to push down every time. So that way I can get an idea for where I want my shock tower, or I want my shock mount to be. So the more vertical your shock, the more work the spring does. As you lay the shock down, the spring doesn't have to do as much work, so it's going to be a softer feel. So I'm going to try to get these at a similar angle to they were before, but obviously I want this bed as low as possible. Before it bottomed out about there, and as you can see, it's about ½ inch. I mean, that's obviously a rough guess, but when I set up suspension mounting, I like to have it with the springs out, just so I can see where full compression is, especially on building a scale crawler. You want it to look good, and you want everything to be low, that way you can get maximum performance. Since these are very heavy, these are the new angle tabs available on skillmountSplice.com. So it's just 2 L brackets. These have a 90-degree bend on them. Snip the little tag, connects the 2 tabs. You buy 2 of them and you got 4. And 4 is enough to mount a bed. So all snipped up. And then I'm going to mount them on the corners. So at the very back by the bumper, and then pretty close to the cab. So now we have these 4 points on the bed that we can weld our 3/16 rod to. So from here I'm probably going to go out to maybe about the shoulder of the body here, and then angle it kind of across. That's what I'm thinking, at least for the front, and then it's going to slope back. So the way that I measure these, there's going to be one piece with 4 bends, is I'll take a measurement from the first bend, or sorry, from where it's going to start to the first bend, second bend, third bend, fourth bend. So I'm just going to add all these up. So we have 6 centimeters, 6 centimeters, 14 centimeters, and then another 6 and another 6. So 6 times 4 plus 14. That's going to give us our overall length for that first hoop. So I'm going to get that cut, and then I'll get the bender set up. So all of the dimensions added up was 38. So I cut my piece of 3/16 solid rod, available on ScaleMountSplice.com, to 40. That way I had a little bit extra. I always cut my pieces long and trim them down at the very end. That way I don't have to worry about being short. So with that being 40, the first thing I'm going to do is mark center. which is going to be 20. And that's kind of the reason I picked 40 instead of 30/80. It's just easier to have stuff. So now I know that's 20, right? 20 is the center. So from the center of the bed over, it's going to be 7 centimeters on each side, because it was 14 centimeters overall width. So I will check it again. It's always good to double and triple check. 14 is on the strong side, so 14 is good. So I'm going to go 7 centimeters from the center mark, right? 7 over, 7 over. That's going to be the bends down. Let's get this set up on here again. Actually, I'm going to switch to my metal ruler for these marks. I always find myself yelling at the tape measure for falling over. It's good for using on the saw and quick measurements, but for stuff like this. And you notice I'm not set up on the end, I'm set up on the 10. And then I just count over 7. And then there's my mark. And then I go over, subtract 7, that's 3. And there's my other mark. So the total distance here is going to be 14. And I can check it, and it's 14. So center line, and these are going to be my bends. So you can even do like a full roll around. That way your mark's all the way around, and then it'll know your bend lines. I mean, however you're comfortable doing it, but I do marks all the way around. I know where the bends are now. So over on the bender, this is like your stopper pin. I don't know how far I'm going to bend it yet. So we're going to start bending and then see how we do. I'm going to start with, let's see, if I do it there, that should be pretty close actually. So I'm going to go a little bit less than I think I need. One cool thing about this bender is it does have a stopper. So when you do find the bend you like, you put it in the pin and it goes to the same spot every time. Alright, so I got the bend set up on here. And consistency is key. So I actually have a mark on the top of my bender here. Because it has like a vice feature, so you turn this knob and then it grabs this and then it doesn't move, you know. So I have my mark set up on the mark on the little vice feature here, and then we're just going to bend it. Flip it over, and then we're going to make sure everything's on the right plane. And straight away, I realized I put my bend in the wrong spot, but we're going to roll with it and see how it goes. I was supposed to line up my mark with a different spot on the vise. Just making sure this is on plane. I mean, it's pretty easy to straighten these out, but this is definitely going to be short. That is not 14. That is, what is that? That is 13. Let's see how it looks on there. Actually, doesn't look too bad. That looks pretty much the width of the cap. So I think I'm going to leave that. I'm happy with it. I just kind of lucked out with this. I did bend it on my mark, but it wasn't where I wanted the bend to be. However, our marks, when we set it up on the truck, are right in line with the gutter, right? The gutter on the roof. So that makes the rest of this a little bit easier. So now I'm going to take my measurement from the gutter to basically the bottom of the door handle here. And that's going to be our bend back in to our angle tabs. And then, because this lines up with the gutter, I can just make my new measurement from the black mark, however long it is. Let's see. I think it's about 6, right? Is that what we said? Yeah, it's 6. I think I'm going to go 6.5. Go a little strong. So we'll go from our black line, our original mark, over 6.5 centimeters. Same thing with this one. Line it up, 6.5. That was not really planned for our marks to be on that gutter, but it makes for good reference points. Same thing, I want to make my mark all the way around on here. So I'm manipulating the rod and rolling it around. Don't lose my measurement. Okay. So the next bend, I think I'm going to leave the stopper in the same spot and see how that goes. Let's see here. And after we've got that bent and checked, kind of lay it on the table and see how wobbly it is, because I have a feeling it's going to be a little wobbly. And there we go. So now that we're touching that, got it how I want it, the angles are good. I'm going to grind these so they're basically a 45. So when you set it flat, this is going to be flat on those tabs. There's not going to be. Okay, so I decided that it was a little too far from the body. So what I did was I added a bend to it so I can make the vertical part square with the cab, but it won't be super far away. So I added a little bend on these bottom ones, which was a real pain, but I like this gap better. Otherwise it would have been like way out here. I wanted to tighten it up a bit. And I didn't want to add any new holes into the rails. So that's what we're looking at right now. Here's a rear profile view of it. Still not centered on the cab exactly, but what it is. Everything seems to hit right where I want it to. Okay, so now I don't know if I'm going to roll back into the rear mount yet, or if I'm going to try to think about the shock tower. I'm going to have a bar going across here. I don't know if I'm going to do it. All right. So we got that center bar added in. I think what we're going to do now is something like that, and it's going to be pretty square, and then kind of dive down. So I think that should be good. Trying to account for some flex here. I've made these before too wide in the back, and they definitely have rubbed when the car flexed. So we're going to see how much flex we can get. I mean, it's still going to go up a little bit too, I guess. So we'll see. I think, yeah, the next piece is going to be a bar that comes back, and then it's going to bend down. So it's going to go like that. Got my two pieces. These are some scraps that I had in the pile. I think they're about 17 centimeters roughly. So I'm going to go 8 back, and then I'm going to bend it. So I'm going to make a mark at 8 on both pieces here. And then I'm going to stack those pieces together, lining up the edge. I'm going to bend them at the same time because they're going to be parallel. I want them to look the same. All right. Let's see here. Start with that. See how that looks. Like I said, these are some scraps, so there we go. I like that a lot. Show you guys the side profile. So this is going to be just like that. It should be pretty close to square. I'll make sure it's exactly square. And I'm going to cut it down here, then I'll make a shock tower off the side. So the shock tower is probably going to be like the Rab's tab coming off the side. Where is my shock? So there's the shock. There's our piece bent, something like that, maybe a little bit more forward. There we go. You can see it mocked up into place here. Let's get that shock moved. So I'm going to slide one of those Rab's tabs on, and then I'll be able to mount my shock pretty much wherever I want over here. But very important, you slide those through hole tabs on before you weld it. You don't want it to go back and cut it off. So but you guys get the idea of the aesthetic here. And might do a little something on the corner, on the edge. I'm not sure yet. Now let's get those tabs slid on. Now we got our Rabs tabs slid onto our bars. You can see we have a double shear shock tab on there now, a shock mount. Let's see if I can pick this up without disturbing it. A little closer to the camera, but so you can see right where the shocks slide on. I mean, that's adjustable right now. We'll see. Oh, there it goes, disturbed. We're going to see exactly where I want the shocks to be, but that's where those bars are going to go. When you use these through-hole tabs, just make sure you put them on before you weld it up. That way, you don't have to cut anything off to add these on. But it's nice because they're trapped on there, so it makes like the adjustment and setup of it very easy. Because you don't have to hold it, you just kind of like push it around where you want it once you have everything else set up. Okay, so this is how we ended up. I used my SMS square tab to set the gap so it was equal between the bar and where the shock tabs are. Also, check the square, make sure this was square, that was square. If you look at it, everything's all nice and squared correctly. See the side profile now, how it kind of dumps down. I'm still not sure if I want to add a little bit more up here. I kind of want to add like a little V, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do that, if I want to do something that kind of goes to here. Not sure, but this is where we're at so far. So we have our 4 angled tabs. We have about about 4 feet of 3/16 rod and a couple of those Rabs tabs. So I was looking at my cut off pieces over there, and I found a couple scraps pretty close, and wow, that was perfect timing. Maybe I won't run it. Maybe that's a sign. So I just added those bars, and I think I'm gonna call it done. I like how it looks. I think it flows good with the body. I like how the lines are and everything. Obviously I gotta put the springs in the back still, but everything's set. It's got flex, nothing hits, nothing binds, and it's a bit lower than it was before. So these shock mounts are maybe a 1/4 inch higher than they were on the stock setup. So everything's gonna be a little bit lower. So this is just tacked up. I have to go over and fully weld everything.